This is A New Angle, a show about cool people doing awesome things in and around Montana. I'm your host, Justin Angle. This show is supported by First Security Bank, Blackfoot Communications, and the University of Montana College of Business. Hey folks, welcome back, and thanks for tuning in. Today, I'm speaking with Mallory Ottariano, the founder of Ewer, an American-made apparel company headquartered in Missoula.
And then the more I started making stuff here, I realized this is really interesting and fun, and I feel excited about reviving an industry here that has been dead for 30, 40 years.
Mallory grew this brand from scratch, and Ewer is an inspiring case study in the sort of business you can build right here in Montana. Mallory, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Justin.
So tell us, where did you grow up, and what did your parents do?
I grew up in Massachusetts, right outside Boston.
Okay.
And my dad is a musician and stand-up comedian.
Interesting. Okay.
Yep. And my mom stayed at home and raised my brother and I. We
Nice.
were homeschooled, so she was our educator for our early childhood.
And how did you make your way to Montana?
I came out here for my last semester of college.
Okay.
We were a big skiing family, and I just dreamed about skiing out west my whole life. So I used college as an opportunity to get out here.
Very
I
good.
went to the University of Massachusetts, and then I did an exchange program my final semester, so I could come to any state school for the same tuition as my state school.
Okay.
And that was awesome. I chose Montana State in Bozeman.
Yeah.
Ended up here, and then bopped up to, I came out in 2011, then I bopped up to Missoula right after.
And when did design and making things and sewing and those sorts of things become part of your life?
I think very young. I was brought up on a very creative curriculum, and my grandma taught me how to sew, my
Okay.
grandma and my mom, and taught me how to knit. And so I used those tools to make wearable things. It was a piece of my family. My mom did a lot of it, and my grandma did a lot of it. And then when I was in high school, I was in public school at that point, and I just used style as a way to stand out from my peers.
Oh, yeah.
Felt like people my age they were all shopping at the same stores. They were buying the same things. They were dressing the same and like wearing the same scents and carrying the same bags. And I thought that was really boring.
Yeah. How did that manifest at the time? Like, how did you distinguish yourself?
I would like go to thrift stores and find clothes and cut them up, or like maybe take a pair of pants and cut the sides of them to put a little panel in to widen them and add some color. I would applique a lot of things on t-shirts and slice t-shirts. I would knit mittens and socks.
And was this just for yourself, or were you giving or selling stuff to friends?
It was just for me at that point.
Nice.
Yeah. And then in college, I kept doing it. And friends would be like, oh, you should sell this. Etsy was becoming a thing then, marketplace for handmade goods. And then after college, I decided, okay, I guess I will sell these.
Yeah,
things.
so how did Ewer come to be?
First, I went to art school before I ended up at UMass. So that was a full immersion fine arts, studio arts program. Then I studied architecture, which was also making things. And then when I graduated, I had a job in agricultural research. And so this thing that I had made and created every day, and all of a sudden that I didn't have an opportunity to do that, wasn't built into my daily curriculum. So I used Etsy as a reason to make stuff. And I thought, if I open up an Etsy shop and I make things for that, there's like a built-in motivation for me to make stuff because I'm selling it. And that will be my creative outlet every day.
And take us back in time, because Etsy seems like it's a well-known thing now, but 10, 12 or so years ago, it was this emergent marketplace. How did you understand it at the time, and why was it a interesting platform to you?
I tend to get very obsessed with things and dive into them fully. So I did very significant deep dives on Etsy. I would find sellers who were making things like me, and I would just go in and figure out what was that turning point at which their sales started to climb. How did their imagery change? How did their products change? What did they do? So I would study these people.
And did you have dialogue with them, or just this is you grokking that from observing them?
Yeah, I was just totally creeping on them. Yeah. And the benefit of Etsy then was it was a built-in marketplace and platform. You didn't have to go find your own customers. Which is still what it provides today. But it was a study of keywords. It was like early SEO, but within the marketplace. Yeah. And that was my study of how I figured out how to get in front of people.
What was it like to sell something that you made for the first time?
It was like totally a digital experience and disconnected. You're selling this thing to this random person in a random part of the country. You package it all up and ship it. And then I remember the first thing I sold. I had been listing things for a couple of weeks before something sold. So I wasn't selling stuff every single day. And even when I was, it was just one or two. So I could take time and write these little notes to people or package things up really beautifully and have these weird experiences with people I didn't even know. I never intended for it to be my career. It was entirely an accident the way that it all turned out. It was just supposed to be something to keep me excited and creatively inspired. So I did it for about a year before I realized that this could maybe be a significant portion of my income. And then it was like my part-time income for a year. And then after 2 years, I was like matching my income. I was working as an architectural designer at that point, and I hated it. So I decided to quit my job and do this full-time.
And what did that feel like?
It was scary, but I think that fear was it wasn't really self-imposed. Like, people in my surrounding orbit were a little doubtful. I think anytime you quit a traditional situation and go out on your own,
I can imagine the traditional parent saying, "What are you doing?"
My parents are like not super traditional, so they were pretty supportive of it.
Nice.
But I think people were like, "What? You're going to thrift stores, you're getting clothes and cutting them up and making new things. This isn't a job."
Yeah.
I feel like I'd proven to myself in the years leading up to it that I could do it.
As it was your side hustle for a while, and then you said you got to a point where it's duplicated the income you're getting from your job. Were you making choices along the line to set yourself up to be a business, like your pricing policy, how you manage inventory, all these sorts of things? Or was it just sort of unfolding, not necessarily haphazardly, but like, was there method to the madness as you were approaching this launch point?
A little bit. I had kind of product collections. I had specific things that I was making all the time, specific ways of doing them.
Yep.
A big piece of my job was going to thrift stores and shopping for stuff.
Okay.
And so I came up with some systems of what days I was doing that, and definitely pricing structures. I left Etsy and I went to my own site. That was like a big strategic pivot to be able to capture people there. And I started email marketing before I quit my job, and I started doing a lot of events. And that was like a huge piece of my business in the early days.
Yes. Talk about the events and how you're investing effort and time in those.
Yeah. At first I would do like local craft fairs, things like the Maid Fair we have here in Montana.
Oh, yeah.
Smaller versions of that all over the board. And then my first full-time year doing it, I decided that I was just going to focus on events and take those people that I was having experiences with in person and digitize them. So I went to about 30 events all over the country that first year. I was on the road the whole year. I would bring my sewing machine and sew on the road too. And I captured names and email addresses of all these people that I engaged with, and that became my initial digital customer base.
And are you making all of the products at this point yourself?
Yes, I made all of the products until 2017. So the first 4 years of doing this, it was all me.
So talk about that moment. I think anybody, maybe you've been in this space or not, but you can imagine going to a booth at the Maid Fair, and it seems like it is a complete labor of love for this person who's making all the stuff, doing the hustle, selling it. Describe the transition from that to a bigger business and that sort of enters growth mode, and you have to hire people and think about a supply chain and not make every piece yourself.
Pretty quickly into the process, I realized that I didn't like making stuff anymore. I didn't actually like sewing.
Okay.
I realized that I liked the experience of creating something that brought somebody joy, but the act of sitting at the machine for hours a day and pumping out hundreds of pieces didn't fuel that emotional need for me. So it wasn't very fun and wasn't exciting. And the other pieces of the business were becoming much more interesting to me. Like, I was really enjoying the finance component, and I was like doing my own bookkeeping, and I was marketing and doing my own photography and exploring all of those avenues. Like, the making thing it didn't require like my individuality necessarily.
Sure.
So that was just like a thing that was very monotonous that I had to do, but the other stuff was much more interesting and exciting. That seemed like the easiest thing to offload because there are factories and people who are way better at sewing stuff than I was. I entered this realm where I was like selling to stores, selling a higher volume of things, and I really it couldn't be like a handmade looking product. I was creating like athletic wear and sportswear, and so it needed to compete on the shelf next to a Patagonia or a Prana. And my sewing skills weren't really going to take it there.
I mean, you mentioned using some upscaled materials from thrift stores and so forth, but yeah, what is the design ethic of Ewer and who's the customer? What problem are you solving for customers?
Today, we create what we call maximalist clothing.
Maximalist, okay.
Yeah, it's really super brightly colored and very brightly patterned and printed. And we make things for original individuals, mostly women, and mostly athletic and active women. So we do a lot of spandex, we do a lot of leggings and running skirts. We do a ton of fleece in the winter, things for a mountain town athlete, somebody who is getting active on their lunch break or going on a trail run in the morning and wants to wear the same thing to work. Things that are very flexible, but serve the purpose of athletic wear without being complete athleisure.
And my sense is that it does the technical job, but provides some sense of individuality. It doesn't quite look as technical as, say, other brands that are more specific.
That's exactly true.
How do you do that? How do you do that in a way that the customer sort of gets it?
Design, like really intentional design. And I think it's more than just, we're not really doing anything revolutionary with our design. We are an athletic company at the end of the day. There's like tons of other leggings out on the market. There's nothing really that unusual or patentable about what we're doing. It's the way that we talk about it and the way that we bring community together that I think is interesting. We're testing everything very heavily because our price point is high. So we want somebody who pays $130 for a pair of leggings to be able to wear that legging running, hiking every day with a dress at work, lounging on the couch to yoga, like a kind of do everything piece.
Does your design philosophy layer into sort of a sustainability philosophy?
We make decisions about product from a variety of sustainability platforms. We look at materials. So we always have to have a material that has some sort of sustainable element to it. We use a lot of recycled polyester, or we use bio-nylon, which is like a polymer-free nylon. Fabrics are one angle. But a really important thing to us is how many times somebody can wear something. We're competing against so many fashion brands, and fast fashion is just the largest producer of clothing.
Yes.
So we want somebody to be able to wear our stuff repeatedly for years and years. And then we also have a resale site. So when people are done wearing it or it doesn't fit them anymore, they can come back to our site and sell it to somebody else and get credit or cash to continue that message.
And I would assume that a big part of the sustainability piece comes from the fact that you make everything here in Montana.
Yeah.
So the supply chain, the carbon footprint of the supply chain is much smaller.
Totally. Yes. We make 100% of our clothes in the United States. We don't make most of our fabrics here, unfortunately. That's not an industry that really exists in this country yet for technical performance fabrics. But about 70% of our pieces are sewed in Montana and Missoula, and the remaining percentage is in California at a factory in LA. But we own our own factory in Missoula now.
Can we break that down a little bit? Because a listener might be thinking, or maybe has the notion that if we bring manufacturing back to the United States, things will just be too expensive. I don't want to pay $4,000 for my iPhone. How have you found it possible to price things at a fair price for an American consumer and make them in the United States?
The margins are very slim. One way that we're able to accomplish it is we are primarily a direct consumer brand.
Okay.
We sell to a handful of stores, but it's not a big piece of our business. We just got into our local Scheels, and that's like definitely there's strategy behind all of it for sure. In locations that we aren't located in, it's helpful. But labor is the biggest cost in making things in the U.S., and it is difficult. We feel a lot of pressure to compete price-wise with other things on the shelf. Like our T-shirt for us is $60, and there's not a ton of $60 T-shirts out there, and we just can't compete with a $20 T-shirt. But in a consumable product like a legging that's not super unique, like we do have to keep our price point similar to other brands.
How labor intensive are the products you make, and is that similar across other brands, or what degree of automation exists in apparel?
Our products are fairly simple. We have a handful of different pieces of equipment that are used in them, but there's a little bit of automation in that we have sewing machines that have automatic cutters, or like we have a machine that's specific to attaching collars, and you lock the garment on with the collar and kind of hands-free, and you just push a foot pedal. So there's a little bit of automation there, but like a person is overseeing every single step, and like 25 to 30 people are involved in the production of one garment throughout its entire supply chain.
We'll be back to my conversation with Mallory Ottariano after this short break. A New Angle is proudly presented by First Security Bank, Blackfoot Communications, and the University of Montana College of Business. This show does not happen without these pillars of our community, and I'm so grateful for their support and encouragement. And speaking of support, have you checked out our new website yet? anewanglepodcast.com. There you can support our show directly with a variety of subscription options. Subscribers get access to bonus episodes, additional segments, writings, and other benefits. So check it out at anewanglepodcast.com.
Hello, this is Jeff Ament from Def Charlie, and you're listening to Justin Angle's A New Angle.
Welcome back to A New Angle. I'm speaking with Mallory Ottariano about building an apparel business right here in Montana. And you have grown through this entire process of getting to where you are today. Talk about maybe some of those key inflection points.
I think first key milestone was outsourcing manufacturing.
Yes.
That was in 2017. I was at a yoga festival in Las Vegas, and my booth neighbor was a clothing company. They happened to own their own factory where they made their stuff.
Okay.
After a great conversation with them, they took on our production. And that was like huge for opening up my time. But it shed light on the challenges of manufacturing and the involvement of manufacturing. It wasn't hands-off like I thought it would be. It was very intensive, and there was so much management remotely that was happening on my part. And when I was first starting out, I didn't really know the right tools to be delivering to a factory, and the factory was small. Throughout that process of working with many factories, I had a lot of mistakes and problems. And at this point, I've probably lost close to $1 million worth of product due to production mistakes. And during the pandemic, we had so many issues. A couple of them were so great that attorneys got involved, and it got extremely messy. So the only way to really be prioritized and make great stuff is to do it ourselves. So I decided that I was going to build my own factory, and I did a crowdfunding campaign in 2021, which I coded into my own site and figured out how to just avoid Kickstarter fees.
Yep.
And this was specifically to buy a building, because I had found this one building that I needed $100,000 extra for. So I crowdfunded $100K in a month, and then the sale of that building completely fell through. And the sale of a dozen more buildings over the next few years did. But finally, earlier this summer in June, we found a building, bought it, and renovated it all over the summer.
Congratulations.
And here we are.
And what I didn't hear in that timeline is wavering on your commitment to manufacturing in the United States. Were you steadfast in that commitment throughout?
At this point, it's a huge piece of our story. And I think it's a huge reason why people support us. And if we were to pivot and go overseas, it would really change our business. I think it would change why people support us. I initially started manufacturing here in America because it was convenient. I didn't have connections with brokers overseas. I didn't have a way of communicating with these people. And I had somebody right in front of me who made stuff here, and it was easy to talk to them. And then as I continued to do that, I realized it is easy. You can hop on a plane. You're maybe a time zone that's just a couple of hours apart instead of 14 hours apart. Like when we work with our suppliers in China and Taiwan now, where we get fabrics, like the delay in communication is so extreme. Yeah. And cost too, to then pay a broker and an interpreter to work with a factory overseas is something that I just really, it seemed like a ton of effort, and it was intimidating to me. And then the more I started making stuff here, I realized this is really interesting and fun, and I feel excited about reviving an industry here that has been dead for 30, 40 years.
Yes.
And that's interesting to me. Now that we make stuff in Missoula, I love seeing the impact that making our clothes here has on our community. In a sea of product and oversaturation of product, it helps us stand out. Yeah. And it is meaningful.
I think when you have a tight, authentic story that you're living, it probably feels easier because just your decisions are simpler, I would imagine. That's not to say the challenges are smaller, but yeah, the guardrails are a little tighter in some ways.
Yeah, and it allows us to be more flexible in our product too. We don't have huge minimums.
Yeah.
If we were to make stuff overseas, right now we make 25 different products. Overseas, we might make 5 and have to make thousands of each one of those 5.
And along those lines, are you able to experiment with different designs, different colorways?
We're totally able to experiment. We're kind of limited by fabric because we have minimums with those suppliers, but we launch new stuff every month, which is pretty fun. We are able to have some core pieces that we make many thousands of, and then we have other things, like we're making some overalls right now. We're just making 100 of them. We've never made them before. We're experimenting with them. We're using some leftover fabric, and it's fun. And we can turn stuff around quickly because we have development and sampling in-house. So this summer we brought an idea from like literally a sketch to sold out in 3 days with some leftover fabric that was in our storage.
And how do some of the more modern tools of selling facilitate that? I mean, you mentioned moving from Etsy to your own website and coding some of your own crowdfunding. You have a strong presence on Instagram. How are you using technology to get direct to the customer?
Social media.
Yeah.
Really, Instagram is our major channel for brand awareness. We've recently started experimenting with some paid ads, but that's just been a few months. That's like a little bit of load off my plate for not free, but yeah, I think it's working. Making videos and having organic reach has just been huge. Making really engaging content and putting a ton of energy into making stuff that people want to share is huge.
How are you learning and growing in your own sort of skill set throughout this process?
Talking to people, expanding my network.
Yeah.
I think that's we're not a big business, but I've been doing it for a very long time. So I have a big network. And I think that's been a huge growth opportunity for me. When I have a question about something, I know there's somebody that I know who knows a lot more about it than I do. I can get inspired from them. Do a lot of reading. I take a lot of courses. I'm really focused on continuing education within my little marketing niche because I went to school for art and architecture.
Sure.
I didn't learn about marketing and strategy and metrics. And so that's very fascinating to me. And I feel like I'm learning every day.
And how have you learned about leadership? Now you have, a 7-person team, and you're in a leadership role. You're working less in the business and more on the business. Like, how's that experience been like for you?
I had no leadership experience prior to this. And managing people was really tricky. And I think my biggest challenge, I've learned a ton. I've gotten so much better at being a leader and listening to people. And I think my biggest challenge is that my main job is not manager. I'm the only revenue generating employee on our team.
Okay.
So I am responsible for managing everyone. We have 2 other managers within our team who manage people's tasks, but I'm ultimately responsible for galvanizing and motivating people, but then I'm also responsible for bringing every single dollar in. I've learned a lot about the hiring process, specifically manual labor positions that are not very exciting, have very high turnover, and you have to be okay with that. I think ultimately I've just learned to release control a little bit and listen to people and give people autonomy. But I made some pretty big management mistakes early on and not really listening properly to the people I was hiring, and that taught me a lot.
Have you made choices about when is the right time to hire?
I think I am my own worst enemy in that regard a lot. Like marketing, for instance, I should have hired for this position a long time ago. I think it's always when I reach a personal tipping point and I don't have any ability to add more time into my day. And then elevating myself into things that I'm passionate about or good at, and trying to take those other things that I might not enjoy that much off my plate and give somebody else the opportunity to get excited about them.
And how are you thinking about growth? What is your relationship to growth? What is optimal? If you could set the trajectory, what would it be?
I've reframed my ideas about growth a lot over the last few years. I used to think that growth was a revenue metric, and I felt really strongly about that for a long time. And over the last 2 years, I've realized the roots of the tree metaphor, that kind of growth is really where we need to be focusing.
Yeah.
The invisible growth and having a very strong foundation. And that's where I've been focusing growth efforts over the last 2 years, is building a supply chain that is very stable, production that is very high quality and is going to produce a very reliable product, and building that foundation before we can grow what's above ground and what's visible to the customer.
How did you kind of arrive at that resolve to build those roots?
In 2022, we were a team of 2 plus a contractor. And that was hard to do a lot of things with.
Yeah.
It was a big year for us. We did do a lot, but we had so many undulations in production and the quality of our product, and that really impacted our ability to do things. Mm-hmm. So the quality of product, I think, is that idea of foundation, because we're a product-based company. We market our product in a fun way, but if we don't have product and we don't have a consistent and reliable way of making it, then everything else suffers. So having a team of people who are here and committed and here for the foreseeable future. We had a lot of doors opening and closing in 2023, like tons of people coming and going. And that made it very difficult to say, this is the team, like we're going to grow with this, because all of my efforts, I was hiring somebody every single month.
Wow.
And so that didn't really allow me much opportunity to think of growth. I was just trying to like keep the boat stable.
Sure.
Yeah. So people and product.
And so 2025, what are your hopes and dreams for this? If things just went perfectly, what would that look like?
I don't have an exit strategy. I don't plan to be exiting. I started this because I love doing it, and I still love doing it, and I don't really see myself stopping loving doing it.
Awesome.
So my exit strategy is just keep doing this until I physically can't anymore. But because it is really like the result of my personal energy, I feel like the business goes through many iterations depending on how I'm personally feeling. And because I've been doing this since I started when I was 22, I'm almost 35. I'm a very different person now.
Yeah.
And the business has changed as my personal interests and aesthetics have changed. And I feel like business is a landscape for playfulness in that regard. I don't always have to be focused on making clothes. If there's something else that's interesting to me, I can pursue that and wrap it into clothes. I design all of our prints because I love drawing, and that's interesting to me. A couple of years ago, I wanted to put on a ski film, so we like opened up our warehouse and had a premiere of a bunch of ski films. And
cool.
Maintaining a fun playground like that, I think, is something that's imperative to like sticking with something for the long term. I'm not trying to grow this to a point that's attractive to investors or buyers. It's not my end goal. My end goal is to have fun and to support the people who are a part of it really well, and that we all have fun together.
What advice would you have for somebody who's trying to navigate some of those risky decisions?
I think first and foremost, figure out something that you're really passionate about. If you're not passionate about this idea, your business idea, you're probably going to exit. You're not going to have a super long tenure at it, because there are so many challenges and doubts that come at you, and you have to have that like internal resolve and dedication, because you're your own cheerleader all the time, and so many other people aren't going to get that. So you have to like really be able to be that for yourself, I think, is number one. And then number two is like, you don't have to have it all figured out. I see so many people making sure they have every single piece of paperwork filed before, and they take years to do it before they take that first step. And just take that first step and figure it out as you go.
Try it. I love that.
Yeah.
Mallory, thanks so much for sharing your story with us. It's a great one, and excited to see what commences in the next several years for you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to A New Angle. If you like what we do and want to support us directly, please consider a subscription at anewanglepodcast.com. A New Angle is recorded at Studio 49, a generous gift from UM alums Michelle and Lauren Hansen. Our presenting sponsors are First Security Bank, Blackfoot Communications, and the University of Montana College of Business. Kelly Larson is our producer. Maddie Jordan is our production assistant. VTO, Jeff Ament, and John Wicks made our music. And Jeff Meese is our master of all things sound. Thanks a lot, and see you next time.